The R&D is all about generating new knowledge, right? That's what you all know what research is. There are three aspects that happen in an academic institute. The one thing is education. Education is, there are in textbooks, right? All the knowledge available, and teacher comes and delivers, whatever is available in the textbook. And then, but somebody has to, write these textbooks. Somebody has to develop new knowledge too. When you are reading a textbook, you don't read a textbook that was written 50 years ago. You read a textbook which was written 5 years ago, or a new edition of the textbook. So all that material that happens in textbooks is continuously updated, right? But how do you update the knowledge available in textbooks? That happens through research. So therefore, all good faculty members, in addition to being teachers, they also are researchers. So they are researching on something, discovering new things. So then they publish papers. When they publish those papers, after 5 years, after 10 years, some part of that publications will get into textbooks. That's why textbooks are continuously rewritten, every 5 years, 10 years kind of a thing. And as students, you always refer to the new editions of these textbooks. So research and education, therefore, always go hand in hand. While one is imparting whatever is available, the other is developing new knowledge. So that's how research and education go hand in hand. But there is a third aspect. For the last 10 years, I would say, now there is a third aspect which, every teacher, every professor in a higher educational institution is supposed to also perform. That is what we call innovation, right? What is innovation? Innovation is you generate new knowledge, and that knowledge is taught to you in the form of textbooks, but somebody has to use this knowledge to solve the societal problems too. Right? If you see, every year there are so many new gadgets coming up. Where are these gadgets coming from? They are coming because somebody has done research, somebody has discovered new phenomenon, and that new phenomenon somebody has converted into a product, right? Into a solution to a problem, and then they commercialize that. We all buy, right? And then therefore the people also make money out of all of these processes. So therefore there are three aspects now. And 10 years ago we were not worried about innovation, but right now when you judge a good teacher, you are looking at, is the teacher a good teacher? Is the faculty member a good teacher? Can he or she deliver to the students in the way that students can understand? The second thing we also judge a teacher is by the nature of research that the teacher has done, how much of new knowledge the teacher has produced. That is also now becoming a very important metric to judge teachers, right? The third aspect, particularly in IITs, IISc kind of institutions, if I just said I have written 500 papers, these days nobody even takes it seriously. They will also ask me, what have you done out of these 500 papers, right? 500 papers meaning you have generated so much of knowledge. Have you used that knowledge to solve a problem? Right? Have you discovered something new which is currently not available? Have you been able to commercialize that? If you have commercialized it, how many people have bought it? How many people are using it? These are now being asked more and more, right? So 10 years, 15 years ago, if I am a great teacher, I could have made my career. And now if I am a good researcher, which is still fine, right? But today, unless you are able to commercialize technology, particularly for people in the leading institutions in the country, unless you have been able to commercialize whatever you have discovered as something new, the people are not too happy, recognizing your work. So therefore, teaching, right, research and innovation, all these three now need to go hand in hand. So that is what has made a professor's life not only exciting, but also very challenging, right? So these are the changing times now. This is what all educationists today are trying to do in the country. So in my talk, I will tell you, of course, overall the general view of where India stands, right? But I will also tell you what I have been doing. I spent 25 years in IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi, and 2.5 years now in BITS Pilani. So 28 years overall. What have I done out of my own research? How have I been working as a researcher and also as an entrepreneur, sort of a thing. So this is what my talk will be. So now if you look at India today, right, these are all official rankings of India done by various bodies. India currently ranks first in number of institutions. No country in the world has more institutions than India. in terms of educational institutions. Now we have lots of institutions, even in NIRF, the National Institution Ranking Framework, there are 13,000 institutions which have participated this year. So even China doesn't have more institutions than India, right? But we don't have, in terms of number of students, we don't have enough students, right? India ranks today second in terms of enrolled students in educational institutions such as, Cambridge Institute of Technology. There are today 43 million Indian students who are studying in these institutions like the CIT and all of that. So the universities and the colleges, there are 43 million students today, enrolled in the higher educational institutions. Now, if you look at the research, right? If you are looking at the research, India stands third in terms of knowledge generation. It comes US, the China is number one, right? US comes number two, then comes India. Of course, we are way behind. Every fifth paper today, every fifth paper written today comes out of China. China has, gone ahead of even US and every other country. And every seventh paper today comes out of, every eighth paper today comes out of US, right? US is far behind China right now. The research papers, meaning new knowledge generation. So China occupies the number one position in terms of new knowledge generation. US comes second, and every eighth paper written in a journal comes out of US. India is at the third position, but every 20th paper comes out of India, right? That's a gap that exists between China and US, and then the India. So India is doing well relative to Japan, Germany, all these countries. We are still ahead, but we are far behind US and China. So though we are ranked third in terms of knowledge generation, right? But then these are the positive things, and we are also filing lots of patents. Now, where do the patents come in, right? If you have discovered something new in your laboratory, what do? Today, the general tendency is to go and publish it, right? Why do we want to publish? Because as researchers, as academics, if I publish a paper which is new, so many people will cite my paper, will use my paper to write more papers. One of the ways a researcher is judged is how many people have cited my paper. That is one of the metrics for knowing how good you are as a researcher. If I have written 500 papers, right? If my papers are cited 20,000 times, that means I am a good researcher. If I have written 500 papers, if there are citations are, from 200, then it means that I am just publishing junk. Nobody is interested in that, right? So therefore, more than how many papers have you written, people also judge you based on how many people have cited your paper in their papers. Therefore, that is how the research quality is measured, which is good, right? But then what happens is the moment I publish, that knowledge is available to everybody. And anybody can use that knowledge, develop a new product, and then sell it back to me, right? I have no control. They might use my own knowledge, but I will have to pay if they have developed a product out of my knowledge, because I have not done anything. I have only published it. They know what I have done, so they can as well, make use of that and sell it back to me, right? But so therefore, to prevent it, what we often do is we patent it, meaning we protect that idea on our name. Once we protect that idea, we can go ahead and publish. Now that IP belongs to me, so therefore, even after once I protected that idea through a patent, right? Even Indian patent is okay. Then what happens is nobody can copy that idea. They have to give credit to me, or they have to license the technology, or they have to pay me money to use that idea. So therefore, patents are becoming more and more important. India was not filing enough patents. For me, I started my career at IIT Bombay in 1998. Until 2010, I hardly filed any patents because I thought just publishing papers is sufficient, right? But then once I realized that what I am doing, right, somebody else is making use of, somebody else is developing technologies out of that, and the country is losing out of what I have done, then I started filing patents, right? I filed lots of Indian patents. I also filed many US patents. So I have now over 50 patents, of which 20 are US patents. And people now, whenever anybody uses any of my patents, they pay me money, right? Lot of that money goes to IIT Bombay, which owns those patents. But some part of it also comes to me as a researcher who has been the inventor on those patents. There is a distribution ratio. IIT keeps some money, and then they also pass on a large chunk of it, to the inventor as well. So that's how the patenting process that's how the patenting process works. So therefore you do research, you publish papers. Before that, you file a patent. So now the rule there is, patent first, publish later, and flourish. Right? The patent, publish, prosper. These are the three ways that we all work. So you first file a patent, then you publish the paper, and then you prosper if you are commercializing the technology, or if somebody is paying you licenses, then you actually make money out of those patents. So therefore, the three things, the three P's that we use now are patent, publish, and prosper. That's what in many academic institutions we tend to do. India ranks 38th in the world today for innovation. Meaning, while we are number 3 in terms of knowledge generation, we are 38th in the world for innovation. Meaning, we are generating knowledge, but we are not using that knowledge, which is not very good, right? India needs to improve on that metric. We are 38th or 39th simply because of the IT companies. If you have noticed, there are like 120 unicorns now. The billion-dollar valued IT or e-commerce companies, there are now about 117, 118 companies. So thanks to our IT, we are at least 38th or 39th. Otherwise, there is nothing much that to talk about. In terms of new products, right? What new products have come out of India? What new technologies have come out of India? Nothing much. So though we are generating a lot of knowledge, somebody else is making use of it. As a country, we are not making use of it. Thanks to IT, at least there is a respectable ranking in terms of innovation, right? And we are also not spending enough money on R&D. We are ranked 54th in the world today in terms of our investments in R&D. We are not actually spending money on R&D, which is also a problem, right? And then we also don't have enough researchers, right? India, if you look at the researchers, they are there in some institutions, right? But overall, for every million population, we have about 270 researchers. India has about 270 scientists per million population. China has 2000 scientists per million population. And China is as big as India in terms of population, but they have, as you can see, the 7 times more researchers than India, right? And then US, for example, has 4,500 scientists per million population, right? So those countries have large base of scientists. India doesn't have a strong base of scientists. Despite that's because we are not spending enough money. Our institutions have also not grown much. So there are multiple reasons which I won't get into, because of the time. But we also, the academia industry collaborations are also not very good in India. So these are all the problems right now that exist in India. So I think let's not worry about it. But overall, the point to take out of this slide is, while we are generating a lot of knowledge, we are not making use of this knowledge, right? That is one thing that we need to change. At least your generation, our generation is trying that. All these startups that are coming out, we have at least laying a roadmap for you. But your generation, right? One would like to see a lot of startups, lot of technology translation, lot of research or knowledge to wealth translation. All of that needs to happen during your time, right? If that doesn't happen, India has no chance of ever becoming a developed country, right? Developed country is basically, how many, large companies do you have in the world, in your country, right? That defines the wealth of the nation, right? So therefore, unless in your generation, right, this process becomes strengthened and taken to the next level, India will never have a chance to become a developed country. So therefore, it is very important for all of us to understand what we need to be doing. Also, what is engineering, right? Very often when we talk about engineering, we say chemical, mechanical, civil. Engineering is not about these disciplines, right? This is all something which is done for administrative reasons. You cannot just admit a student and appoint a faculty member, right? You need to do a management of them. You need to administer the entire process. So therefore, we have created these departments and all of that. But otherwise, the actual definition of engineering is about finding optimal and sustainable solutions to the problems, right? Engineers' role is to solve problems. That's all what engineering is about. Engineering is not about mechanical, civil, electrical or anything. Engineering is all about solving problems. To solve a problem, often you need multidisciplinary teams, right? No one disciplinary training will be sufficient to solve a problem. Whenever you want to solve a problem, you need multiple departments to come together. You need people from multiple disciplines to come together to solve that problem. One problem that we took up at IIT Bombay, for example, had 7 departments, right? People, faculty and students from 7 different departments coming together to solve the problem, right? So therefore, engineering is all about solving problems. From your disciplinary knowledge, you may contribute to the solution. Similarly, people from other disciplines will also contribute. When all of that comes together, when you form a team, right, then you will be able to find problems to the solution, problems to the societal problem. So the solutions to the societal problem. So therefore, engineering is all about solving problems. So you must always keep that in mind. If you are a good engineer, it doesn't matter whether you are doing mechanical, civil or chemical. It actually makes no difference, right? You need to be good in what you do. You need to be good in your own discipline. That is eventually what is required for you to become entrepreneur and to solve the societal problems. I will also, show you a little bit about that. If you look at this, a mobile phone, right? The mobile phones, I have seen almost all the generations of mobile phones. I am currently, even using these foldable phones and all of that, right? If you look at this mobile phone, it's engineering, right? You don't look at mobile phone as a science kind of a thing. Mobile phone is an engineering. But behind this mobile phone, there are at least a dozen Nobel Prizes. You know that Nobel Prizes are not given to engineering. Nobel Prizes are only given to scientists, physics, chemistry kind of a area. So there are at least a dozen Nobel Prizes behind the modern mobile phone. Every aspect of the mobile phone, whether it is the display, right, the display, wireless technology, the battery, the memory, the processor, the polymers, the transistor that is used, all of them have got a Nobel Prize, right? By somebody putting all of that together, whether it is Samsung or Steve Jobs, right? By putting all of them together, somebody has made a gadget, right? And that gadget is what we are all using right now. So therefore, the science is behind all of these innovations. So if you are good in chemistry, right, I mean, you should be proud of that fact and you should pursue as your interest. If you are good in mathematics, you must pursue that, because all of these disciplines have equal importance when it comes to solving problems. Without science, there is no engineering. Any engineering without science is what we call, jugaad, right? I can put things together, it might work. But without science, there is no gadget ever built and there is no technology ever developed. So therefore, science is as important as engineering, which is something which we must always, keep in mind. And so this is what is that. And then I will skip some of this, but I will also skip some of this because we don't have much time. But this I told you already. The engineering, the colleges are about education, knowledge generation, and innovation, right? And so these are the 3 aspects that we need to be worried about. If you look at all these unicorns, I've just put the list of all the unicorns in the country. They have, some of them are becoming unicorns, some of them have ceased to be unicorns depending on the valuation, right? We have today about 118 unicorns. But if you look at all these unicorns and study, what has gone into building these unicorns, right? Much of what you see, right? These are all what I call the business model innovations, right? They have all, done business model innovation, but there is no product innovation. None of these unicorns, except for 5% of them, there are about 5 unicorns today in India, which are actually selling a product-based IP. They have a patent. Based on the patent, they have developed a technology, and based on the technology, they have built a company. That company has now acquired $1 billion valuation. There are about 5 of them, right? Out of 117 unicorns, just about 5 are based on a patent. The rest of them are all what I call the business model innovations, or mostly the aggregation model, right? Somebody has aggregated all the taxis and created Ola. Somebody has aggregated all the restaurants, created Zomato, right? Somebody has aggregated the trucks. Somebody has aggregated something, recently somebody proposed me, they are aggregating everything, right? They can aggregate dhobis, you can aggregate carpenters, and you can build companies. That's exactly what India is currently doing, right? So that is okay. There is nothing wrong in that. But the goal here is to do more product-based unicorns, more IP-based unicorns, more research-oriented unicorns, right? That is what India needs to be doing. And now, but who would do that, right? If an IP-based unicorn, where do they come from? Most of them have a very good chance of coming out of academic institutions such as Cambridge Institute of Technology or IITs or IISc, because this is where a lot of research is happening. This is where many faculty members, in these institutions are where they are doing new research, they are looking at new aspects, right? Out of that research, if you can start a company, right, and that company, if it develops a product, right, and that product, if it becomes big, that is what you call the product-based unicorn kind of a thing. So academic institutions have a very good chance of making it to, making these knowledge kind of an economy. And but I will, there are other things that need to happen. We will also not worry about some of these. I'll skip some of it. I will, go to my own work. So this also, I think since I see a lot of students here, this we can do some other time. But then how do you start a company, right? How do you now, create wealth out of research, right? For that, you need to choose the right kind of a problem. The kind of a problem that you work is always important in terms of, how you can create wealth. And if you look at India, right, there are lots of problems in India. I often say that India has all the problems of the world, right? So the what problem India doesn't have, which others have. You go to some corner of the country, you find, every problem that is there in the world, you will also find it in India. So you don't have to look at American journals, you don't have to talk to Americans to find out what the problems are. You just need to look around you, right? You look at what the problems in the society are, what are the problems farmers are facing, what are the problems medical doctors are facing. Each one of them is an opportunity for you to innovate, right? So therefore, if you look at agriculture is a big problem today. I mean, farmers are not making enough money. Almost 50% of Indians are connected to agriculture, make their livelihoods out of agriculture, but it only contributes 17% to country's GDP, right? On the other hand, if you look at IT, right, IT is less than 1% of people, but they contribute 8% to GDP. Right? So that's a problem right now, because that's the reason why farmers don't make enough money. There are so many farmer suicides and all of that. Can that become a problem for a researcher? Can you find solutions to improve the productivity of a farmer so that farmer can make more money? That's a company. If you can do that, you have created wealth right there, right? And if that can become a unicorn, you have solved one of the problems that the farmers are facing. Similarly, healthcare, right? And hardly any healthcare infrastructure outside of big cities, right? You go to any big hospital in Bangalore or in Delhi, there are so many patients waiting outside for a bed. Why is it so? Because the rural areas, there is hardly any healthcare infrastructure. Everybody has to come to big cities. And today, if these are mind-boggling numbers. Every year, 22 million people, 2.2 crore Indians go below the poverty line because of healthcare expenditure. Meaning somebody in a remote place has fallen ill in the family. Now the whole family comes to Bangalore, right, in search of treatment. In the process, the family goes below the poverty line. And that number today officially is 2.2 crore Indians go below the poverty line because of healthcare expenditure. That's a big problem. So can you develop web-enabled, kind of medical diagnosis? Before somebody falls ill, can you, from big cities, can you screen people who require, some preventive kind of a care? But these are all web-enabled technologies. All the technologies are there. Somebody has to put it all together and actually develop a solution to, the healthcare monitoring. And similarly, if you look at security, right? If you go to airports, what is preventing, any major security problem at the airport? Until you reach the security checkpoint, there are no checks, right? Anybody can carry anything inside the airport, right? Nobody is checking you at the gates, and you go all the way up to the security checkpoint, but that's pretty late, right? If somebody is carrying something, you can become a big issue for the country. And can you solve that problem? Can you develop sensors at the gates, right? When somebody is walking in, can these sensors pick up what one is carrying, right? That requires a technology again. And there are no such technologies anywhere in the world. It's not just India. You go to Washington airport or any other airport, there are no such technologies to prevent anyone bringing such banned kind of substances inside the airports. That's a major, technology kind of an area. And so that's again something. Water. India has only 4% of the world's water resources, but we have 18% of world's population, right? The desalination. Do we have so much of, the seashore, right? Can we use the water, in the seas to desalinate that and use it for drinking purposes? It's already being done. Singapore does it, many other countries do that, but the cost of desalination is very high. Can you innovate in terms of reducing the cost of desalination so that no city will have to face any water problem which has a seashore, right? But that again calls for technologies. And so there are so many areas where one can make huge innovations today in terms of developing new technology. So India, all of these are platforms, whether you call IT, right? Whether you call biotechnology, whether you call nanotechnology or artificial intelligence or quantum technology, right? These are the technology platforms. To solve any of the problems that I talked about, right, you need to use some of these technologies. And for that, you need to first of all become good at some of these technologies, right? Once you understand these technologies, once you know what these technologies are, right, through higher education or by working in some of these industries, then you use them to solve some of these problems, right? So therefore, education becomes very important to solve any of these kinds of problems. And now I am a nanotechnology researcher, right? I work in the nanoelectronics kind of an area. And this is something that I started doing at IIT Bombay. I joined IIT Bombay, as I told you, in 98. Starting from 2005 onwards, I started to take up research problems which are of relevance to the society, right? Which are problems which need to be solved using nanotechnology specialization, in which I did my bachelor's, master's, PhD. All my master's and PhD were in microelectronics and nanoelectronics. So I used whatever I learned, right, out of my education to solve some of the problems, for using nanotechnology as a solution, right? And so these are, I'll again skip some of these. So I started working with a problem called cardiac diagnosis. When I was in IIT Bombay, during MTech interviews, what happened was one of the faculty members, right, he started complaining of chest pain. He had a severe chest pain, but he said, this is a chest pain which will go away. There is nothing much to worry about. So we continued with the interviews, but the next day, right, it became very severe. He was not able to sit. We had to rush him to the hospital. And when we went to the hospital, the doctors actually did ECG and all that. The ECG was normal, but still the chest pain wouldn't go away. And that is when doctors said, we need to do some cardiac tests. The cardiac tests are, when somebody is having a heart problem, right, before a heart attack occurs, and the body releases certain proteins into the blood. The heart muscles, before they die, they release certain proteins into the blood. These are like myoglobin, troponin kind of markers. And by monitoring these protein concentrations in the blood, even if ECG is normal, if troponin concentration is high, it means that you are having a heart problem, or you might have a major heart attack. But how do you detect troponin, right? At that time in 2005, you could only detect troponin by sending the blood sample to a pathological laboratory, right? A laboratory, and then wait for the reports. It used to take about 4 hours at that time to get those reports. And doctor said, while talking to the doctor, you send the blood sample reports, you are waiting for those blood samples and you are waiting for the reports. And doctor said, these 4 hours, I cannot do anything, right? I have to wait for the reports to know that it's actually a cardiac problem, so that I can, decide whether to bypass surgery or whether to, do medication and all of that. And that is when, chatting us, the doctor said, why don't you guys develop something where in the hospital itself, right, I can do these tests, using a bedside. Now I should have a mobile phone kind of a device. I take it out, put a drop of blood, right, and I know right there what the troponin concentration is, right? If I could do that right here, I can take immediate action. I can save so many lives, because these are the golden hours for somebody who might have a heart attack. And that's what the doctor said. And that triggered in us, a kind of a thing saying, can we develop something like that? Can we develop a simple lab on chip where I put a drop of blood, and within 5 minutes, I should be able to know what is the concentration of troponin, what is the concentration of myoglobin. So that the problem statement arose right there sitting in the hospital. So once we came back to the institute, then we started discussing that. Then we went to a kind of an agency which was a DRDO sponsored agency. We talked to them. It got funded. So we started this project in IIT Bombay to develop cardiac diagnosis chip. Right, a chip where in 5 minutes, in about 100 rupees, you should be able to diagnose patients who have a chest pain and rule out cardiac problems, or say that the chest pain is because of cardiac problems. And that is such a big problem today, all over the country, because every third death in India happens because of a cardiac failure. And so there, if you can have such technologies, you can actually solve a lot of lives. And I'm an electrical engineer. I come from the electronics, microelectronics background. I did not know what is troponin, what is myoglobin, what is cardiac diagnosis, but we formed a team, right? We had in our team people from biomedical engineering, people from mechanical, people from chemistry. So that was the first large project undertaken at IIT Bombay, which is multidisciplinary in nature, where 7 different departments getting involved to solve a problem, right? That's what we did. And then in my group, I started working on a cantilever-based platform where you have a nano cantilever, where when these proteins bind to the cantilever, that deflects the cantilever. So this is a kind of a nano mechanical platform where any selective binding on the cantilever surface of these proteins, I can detect electrically. So when the binding happens, the cantilever deflects. These are all piezoresistive cantilevers, so which I can electrically know how much of protein is there in the blood, right? I won't get into those details. So, but we did a lot of technology development, right? This was a technology platform. So we did a lot of research. There were at least a dozen PhD students working on it, and multiple undergraduate students at IIT Bombay who got involved in this project. So we finally, worked on the platform. We developed the technology, and we published lots of papers. We filed many patents around this idea, and then we finally developed a technology. I'll skip this. So this is the first prototype, because remember, the doctor said, it should look like a mobile phone. I take it out and I should be able to do the test. So we put it all together, and finally our first prototype looked like this. So this is we called it iSense, standing for infarct sensor, because we are detecting the heart condition, myocardial infarction. So we called it iSense. We developed this technology, and under funding from these 2 government agencies, and we started a company around that time, NanoSniff at IIT Bombay. My first company was in 2011, right, where we developed the entire technology and transferred it to them, right? And then around that time, there was a bomb blast in Pune, and then there were security agencies who approached us, saying that we heard that you developed a platform to sense the materials, right? Sense such proteins. Can you develop an explosive detector? They wanted basically something which is a replacement for the dog, a sniffer dog. So they said, can you develop an electronic nose platform? Just as dogs sniff explosives, right? Can you sniff explosives, using electronics, right? The way, if you look at electronics, your mobile phone, it has lots of sensors. There are at least 24 sensors inside the mobile phone, right? If you look at us humans, right, we basically talk about 5 senses, right? Out of these 5 senses, look at how many senses mobile phone has. We can see, right? Mobile phones also have excellent cameras. They also can see. We can hear. Mobile phones have excellent microphones. They can also hear. We can touch, right, and feel. Mobile phones also have a great touch sensitivity. Mobile phones don't need it, but there are these days robotic surgeries performed where the robots have the sense of touch as good as humans. So touch, hearing, right, and then touch, hearing, and seeing, these 3 senses phones have already got, electronics has already got. Which are the 2 senses which we humans have, which mobile phone doesn't have? One is smell. Phones cannot smell anything, electronics cannot smell anything, and they cannot taste, right? By just tasting, you can tell whether the food quality is good, whether the water quality is good. Phones have no sense of touch, no sense of smell, no sense of taste, right? These are the 2 senses which electronics has still not been able to perform as well as humans. Otherwise, phones can see better than humans, phones can hear better than humans, and phones and robotics have touch sensitivity as good as humans. The only 2 senses electronics still hasn't been able to get and achieve the human level perfection are the smell and the taste, right? So we said, can we develop electronic nose platform? right? Why do you want to do that? Because if you go to any airport, right, you see these sniffer dogs everywhere. The sniffer dogs, because a dog has a smell sensitivity which is at least 1,000,000 times better than us humans, right? Every molecule has a vapor pressure. When there is a vapor coming out, we can't smell everything. We can smell perfume. That's why we use perfume. But dogs can smell something million times better than us humans. So if somebody is carrying explosive, right, a dog can still smell that explosive, but we humans can't. So our goal was to develop an electronic nose which is as good as a dog's nose, right? If I develop it as good as human nose, it's of no use, right? But if I develop it as good as a dog's nose, then you can replace sniffer dogs and you can put them at the airports, at the entry points. You can put them in the buses and trains, that anybody carrying any banned substance know that this sniffing device will pick up the smell and will alert the security guard. So that was a kind of a platform that we wanted to develop, and so here we started working on it. We started making an electronic platform which can smell, right? And so this is the very first prototype we developed it. We called it XSniff. It's an electronic sniffing device. It takes in the air, right? It is trained to detect different smells. So each smell gets converted into a digital pattern, right? So each smell converts into a digital pattern, and whenever, so you need to train it, right? Just as we humans, we did not know what smell corresponded to what, right? When you were growing up, when the first time you smelled something, right, somebody told you that this corresponds to, let's say, jasmine or agarbatti or whatever it is, then your brain registered that. Next time when you smelled the same thing, you knew, what was it, kind of a thing. Exactly the same way, you develop a platform which every smell, right, is a molecule, right? These molecules go and bind to different sensors, and by binding you basically convert every smell into an electronic pattern, right? And then you train the system for all different smells, so many different patterns. So therefore, whenever a smell appears again, it knows that that particular smell corresponds to this particular pattern, kind of a thing. So that's a digital electronic nose kind of a platform which we developed, and then we then started to test it. We gave it to security agencies, and they came back and said, sir, it works well, but it has only 75% accuracy, meaning in 25% of cases, it gives false positives. What are these false positives? Because an explosive is what? Explosives also contain carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen and oxygen, right? CHNO, and they have different proportions. So they said that there are many molecules containing the same elements, right? For example, shoe polish. Shoe polish will also have exactly the same molecules but in different concentrations. So now it is giving 25% of cases, it's giving a lot of false positives. That's what the security agencies told us. Then we went back to drawing board. It took us almost 4 years to develop this electronic nose platform, but they said the false positives are too high. It's a nuisance to use it in the field. And then we went back to drawing board, and then we started to look at what else can we do to measure explosives. So one day when we were discussing, right, the multidisciplinary team, the idea was, what is the property of an explosive? The property of an explosive is to explode, right? That's why you call it an explosive. So our idea was, you collect these particles, right? If somebody is carrying explosives, there is vapor, right? In the vapor there are particles. That's why dog is able to smell them. Now you collect these particles either from the vapor phase or from the hands, right? If somebody has assembled a bomb and then handed over the bomb to somebody else, right? There are always some particles which will stick to the body, and these particles, that's why when you go to the security at the airports, what do? They take a swipe, right? They sometimes take a swipe out of your hands or out of your bags, right? Why are they doing that? Because if you are carrying any substance, the idea is that some particles might be stuck to the suitcase handles which you have handled, or when you shook hands with somebody, some particles have got transmitted, and that is why they do take a swipe, put it under a system, and that system actually measures whether it's explosive or not. So our product was exactly that. We said, you collect particles either from the vapor or from the swipe, right? You explode it. Because it's an explosive, it will go through explosion. When it explodes, it generates energy, because these are all high energy materials. So when it generates energy, there is a temperature, right? The temperature is what we measure. So for every explosive, we do a thermal profiling. right? We do a thermal profile of every explosion, and for explosive, there is a different thermal profile as compared to non-explosive. So that's the entire product idea that we had, that to detect explosives, you explode, right? But then that's a crazy idea, right? But remember, we are only taking about 10 nanograms of explosives to actually explode. This system can measure the temperature release out of 10 nanograms of explosive, which is so tiny, therefore you won't even hear, you won't even see, you won't even feel, but the system can still measure, right? So that is exactly what we developed as a platform, and then we developed it as a technology. This is called nano sniffer, and if the video plays.
Vehant Technologies, an IIT Delhi incubated company, and NanoSniff, an IIT Bombay incubated company, jointly manufacture and launch NanoSniffer, an advanced and affordable explosive trace detector, screening visitors and passengers for explosives at various public or crowded spots have become the norm due to the increase in the terrorist activities around the globe. Every luggage and person passing through the security checkpoint is tested by the security officer to check whether they have traces of explosives on their surface, skin or hair. NanoSniffer proudly claims to be the first explosive trace detector in the world using microsensor technology. The microsensor of NanoSniffer is made using micro-electromechanical system MEMS technology in semiconductor fab. The sensor uses fabrication techniques such as lithography, etching, deposition, spin coating, and finally released to the microsensor. The core technology is protected by patents in the US and Europe. All of our actions leave trace behind, which is then screened by the security personnel. The security has to concentrate at the sampling areas that are likely to be touched by hands. In the case of a bag, this will include handle, buckle, and zipper. Post-sampling, the swipe is inserted into the system where microheater subjects the particles into rapid heating. In case of explosives, this triggers exothermic reactions which are picked up by the integrated temperature sensor of the microheater, thereby landing each compound in its own thermal signature. The algorithms use these signatures to distinguish between explosives and non-explosives. Further analysis of the algorithms help in categorization into the appropriate class of explosives. The follow are few NanoSniffer features. It is the first microsensor-based ETD. It detects and identifies explosives in less than 10 seconds. Identifies and categorizes explosives into different classes. Can detect ng quantities of explosives traces. It detects all classes of military, conventional and homemade explosives. It is portable and affordable. It gives visible and audible alerts with sunlight-readable color display. NanoSniffer explosives trace detection technology can be deployed at airports, railway stations, ports, malls, metro stations, corporate parks, hotels, and tourist spots. The goal is to intercept and prevent access of explosives trafficking. NanoSniffer is 100% made in India product.
I think these are basically the technologies now, and can go ahead. Yeah. So this was released by the minister that time, the Union Education Minister, because it was by then I had moved to IIT Delhi, so IIT Delhi got involved, IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi, and this technology now is bought. This was done during the COVID time, so you can see are all wearing the mask, and now this technology is there at many airports and all that, and then we started working on it further. We miniaturized the entire technology, and the goal is to have each one of them is like a sniffing device, so you can network airports so that anybody going there will be able to be tracked. And we also so you can be in the buses, trains, and protect major installations from bomb attacks and all of that. And to power this sensor, we developed a technology using piezoelectrics, where when the buses are moving, the vibrations are what we use to generate energy, and that energy drives the sensor. So we also did that. And after I moved to IIT Delhi, I started a project between IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay to, so this technology is now everywhere in the airports. We are even exporting it. And after I moved to IIT Delhi, another problem which I thought I should take up is the agricultural sensors. Like I told you, India, the farmers are not making enough money, which is a major crisis right now. So now we started between IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay. So we took this soil health card that Government of India has given for soil health monitoring. So we started developing sensors for these micro and macro nutrients which the farmer needs to monitor, so that the farmer will know what fertilizer to use, all of that, so that you can do it in a controlled fashion, and that can save the input cost. And here again, we started working on multiple prototypes between IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay. And so we recently in 2018, we launched a product called NutriSense, which can actually detect NPK, nitrates, phosphate, potassium, pH, and soil moisture. So these 5 parameters can be monitored by this device. We launched it in the market. Now lots of states, many farmers are using it. We started our second company, Soil Sense, out of this technology. Soil Sense now is an established agricultural company, and they are also doing very well. They have set up their manufacturing in Pune, while the NanoSniff actually happens in Bombay, the manufacturing, but the Soil Sense manufacturing happens in Pune. And so we now have a lot of work done. It has all gone to the field, and a lot of farmers are using. So this is now a full-fledged product and a company. And then after I moved to BITS Pilani about 2.5 years ago, I started my third project, which is organic dosimeter. So this is what happens is, I had done this work when I was in IIT Bombay. Lot of papers. We had a US patent granted on that. Now, when cancer patients go to hospital, right, they are very often given radiation therapy. They are given the gamma radiation, other kinds of radiation to kill the cancerous cells. How do you measure that radiation? That radiation measurement is done today by using Geiger-Müller counters, which are very expensive. All those counters are imported. And that's the reason why radiation therapy costs go up. Right? What we thought was, can we use simple organic transistor patches, organic materials to sense the radiation? You not only need to measure the radiation dose, but you also need to monitor the profile, because you need to make sure that the healthy cells don't see radiation, and only the cancer cells, you need to match the profile of cancer with the radiation with the appropriate amount of dose. And both of these we wanted to measure using an organic transistor patch. So we started a project now about a year ago between BITS Pilani and IIT Delhi. It's a collaborative project between the two institutes. So we have done a lot of progress in that. We have actually filed 2 patents now on the organic dosimeters, and the patent is already granted. And this is something now that I hope to start the third company on organic dosimeters, particularly for cancer, radiation measurements kind of thing. So this is how it all happens, right? These are all the prototypes that we developed, and 2 startups have come about it. NanoSniff is now a full-fledged company. They operate operate in Bombay, and then the Soil Sense is the company which is also doing very well. They operate out of Pune, right? And so therefore, as I said, India is opportunities, right? Every problem can be a startup. Every solution that you develop for these problems can result in a technology startup, right? That is where the research becomes very important. And I'll skip some of that, but there are enough opportunities here. I will leave you with what I call the smile curve, right? If you look at US, or if you look at Apple, right? What does Apple do, right? This smile curve is a very important concept in all these management schools. In a company, the value addition happens against the production chain. The manufacturing has the lowest value addition. The companies which do pure manufacturing don't make enough money, whereas the companies that do concept R&D, branding, sales and marketing, right, those who think of a new product idea, they are the ones who make the maximum money. Look at Apple, right? Apple valuation is $3 trillion. Apple doesn't do any manufacturing. Look at Nvidia. Their valuation is over 3 trillion again, but Nvidia doesn't do any manufacturing on its own, right? Apple outsources all of its manufacturing to a company called Foxconn. Foxconn valuation, if you look up, is about $60 billion or $70 billion. So companies which do manufacturing don't, become great. Companies which think of a product idea are the ones which keep all the margins. Apple keeps all the margins because they came out, with a product idea, which is that Apple phone or iPads or whatever, they have been doing. So therefore, thinking of new product ideas is what is important. And so these product based startups, right, the companies which think of a new product idea and get the manufacturing done anywhere wherever it is cheaper, they are the ones which India currently requires. If you look at US, right, all these trillion-dollar companies are all in the US. No country, Europe doesn't have a single trillion-dollar company. And if you look at any of these startups now, they don't actually do any manufacturing. All their manufacturing happens in China, Taiwan kind of places. But they are the most valued companies in the world today, right? And whereas the only company outside of US which is a trillion-dollar company is the Saudi Arabia, oil company, which is, expected. But otherwise, the technology companies, only US has been able to create through this outsourcing kind of a model by thinking of new product ideas, whether it is in software sector or in the hardware sector. I think that is what India needs to be doing today. I think, that's where we need startups, that can actually create that kind of a wealth. And most of these projects, as I can see, this was my group at IIT Bombay. So it had so many faculty, so many students, but all of that work resulted in lots of papers, lot of patents. But at the end of the day, we took up a societal problem, we developed a solution, we used startups to get it into the market. So that's how, this is all done.